In the heart of the Arabian Peninsula, where ancient traditions merged with modern opulence, Prince Khalil stood at his palace balcony, gazing at the endless sea of sand that surrounded his kingdom of Alara. The morning sun painted the dunes in shades of gold, creating a mesmerizing spectacle that failed to lift his spirits. His reflection in the ornate mirror beside him showed a young man dressed in traditional royal garments, every detail perfectly arranged, yet his eyes held a distant look that betrayed his inner turmoil. "Your Highness," called Ahmed, his most trusted advisor, interrupting his thoughts. "The delegation from the Al-Rashid family has arrived. They await your presence in the Grand Hall." Khalil adjusted his ceremonial robe and nodded, his face automatically assuming the composed expression expected of him. Today marked the official announcement of his engagement to Princess Layla Al-Rashid, a union that would merge two of the most powerful families in the region. The marriage had been meticulously planned since their childhood, a perfect strategic alliance that would ensure the continued prosperity of both dynasties. As he walked through the marble corridors, servants bowed deeply, their eyes cast downward in respect. The palace walls, adorned with intricate Islamic patterns and precious stones, seemed to close in around him. Each step toward the Grand Hall felt heavier than the last, the weight of his royal duties pressing down on his shoulders. The Grand Hall buzzed with anticipation. Diplomats, nobles, and members of both families filled the space, their expensive perfumes mixing with the scent of burning incense. Princess Layla stood beside her parents, the picture of grace and sophistication. Her dark eyes met his briefly, calculating and composed before she lowered them demurely. "My son," King Fahad's voice boomed across the hall as Khalil approached. "Today marks a momentous occasion for our kingdom." The king's words were met with approving murmurs from the assembled guests. The formal proceedings began, a carefully choreographed dance of politics and tradition. Khalil played his part perfectly, speaking the right words at the right moments, accepting congratulations with practiced grace. Princess Layla remained by his side, her perfectly manicured hand resting lightly on his arm, her smile never wavering. During a brief moment alone, she leaned closer to him. "We will make a formidable team, my prince," she whispered, her voice smooth as silk. "Together, we shall build an empire that will be remembered for generations." Khalil studied her face, noting the ambition burning behind her polished exterior. Layla had been groomed for this role since birth, much like himself. She viewed their marriage as the culmination of years of preparation, a chess piece moved perfectly into position. That evening, after the celebrations had wound down, Khalil retreated to his private quarters. He removed his formal attire piece by piece, feeling as though he was shedding layers of expectations. In simple clothes, he stood before his window once again, watching as the setting sun transformed the desert into a canvas of purple and orange hues. A plan began to form in his mind. He needed to escape, if only for a few hours, from the suffocating perfection of his golden cage. The bustling city that sprawled beyond the palace walls called to him, promising a taste of the freedom he craved. Opening a hidden compartment in his wardrobe, Khalil pulled out a set of common clothes he had secretly acquired. He had often dreamed of walking among his people unrecognized, experiencing life beyond the carefully controlled environment of the palace. Tomorrow, he decided, he would take that risk. As night fell over Al-Sara, the prince made his preparations. He studied maps of the city's marketplace, memorizing routes and landmarks. If he timed it right, he could slip away during the afternoon prayers when the palace guard rotation would provide the perfect opportunity for his escape. Little did Khalil know that his planned excursion would lead him to a small restaurant tucked away in the heart of the marketplace, where destiny awaited in the form of an unexpected encounter that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, duty, and the true meaning of happiness. The bustling marketplace of Al-Sara pulsed with life as Khalil, now dressed in simple linen clothes and a traditional keffiyeh that partially obscured his face, merged into the crowd. The transformation from Prince Khalil to Karim, his chosen alias, felt liberating. For the first time in his life, he moved through the world without the weight of constant observation. The sensory explosion of the souk overwhelmed him, merchants calling out their wares, the pungent aroma of spices, the vibrant displays of fruits and textiles. Children darted between stalls, their laughter mixing with the calls to prayer echoing from distant minarets. Everything felt raw, real, and wonderfully unpredictable. As the afternoon heat intensified, an enticing aroma caught his attention. Following his nose, Khalil discovered a modest restaurant nestled between a spice merchant and a carpet seller. The sign, weathered but lovingly maintained, read Layla's Kitchen in elegant Arabic script. Through the windows, he could see simple wooden tables and chairs, each adorned with fresh flowers in recycled glass bottles. Inside, the restaurant hummed with activity. A young woman moved confidently through the space, her dark curls escaping from beneath a chef's headscarf, her hands gracefully orchestrating the flow of dishes from kitchen to table. Something about her presence commanded attention, not through authority but through an authentic passion that seemed to infuse every gesture. "Welcome to Layla's," she said, approaching him with a genuine smile. "I'm Amira and this is my family's restaurant. Would you like to try our lunch special?" Her voice carried a warmth that caught him off guard. In the palace, every interaction was measured, every word calculated, but Amira's welcome held no agenda, no hidden meaning. "Yes, please," he replied, choosing a corner table that offered a view of both the kitchen and the street outside. The meal that followed changed everything. Each dish told a story, traditional recipes elevated by subtle creative touches that spoke of both respect for tradition and courage to innovate. The lamb was tender enough to cut with a spoon, perfumed with herbs he couldn't quite identify. The rice carried hints of saffron and rose, and the vegetables were prepared with a precision that would have impressed his palace chefs. "How do you find everything?" Amira asked, returning to his table. Her eyes sparkled with genuine interest in his response. "This is—" Khalil paused, searching for words that wouldn't betray his royal upbringing. "I've never tasted anything quite like it. The flavors are familiar, but somehow new." Amira beamed with pride. "That's exactly what I aim for. My father always said that cooking is about finding the magic in the everyday. He taught me everything I know about running this kitchen." A shadow crossed her face at the mention of her father, but she quickly brightened again. "Would you like to try our special dessert? It's not on the menu." Before he could answer, a commotion arose from the kitchen. An elderly woman emerged, gesturing frantically. "Amira, the supplier is here with bad news about our order." "Excuse me," Amira said, hurrying toward the kitchen. Through the open door, Khalil caught fragments of an heated discussion about prices and delivery schedules. He watched as Amira handled the situation with a mixture of firmness and diplomacy that reminded him, ironically, of his own training in statecraft. When she returned, her smile showed slight strain. "I apologize for the interruption. Running a restaurant means wearing many hats: chef, manager, negotiator, and sometimes miracle worker." "It seems like a lot of responsibility," Khalil observed, genuinely impressed by her resilience. "It is, but this place is everything to us. After my father—" She hesitated, then continued, "After we lost him, keeping his dream alive became my purpose. My mother and younger sister depend on me now." As the afternoon wore on, Khalil found himself lingering over his meal, drawn into conversation with Amira between her duties. She shared stories about her regular customers, her experiments with recipes, and her dreams of someday expanding the restaurant while keeping its heart intact. When the time came to leave, Khalil realized he had spent hours in the restaurant, longer than he had planned to be away from the palace. But for the first time in years, he had experienced moments of genuine connection, unmarred by protocol or politics. "Will you come back?" Amira asked as she handed him his change, their fingers brushing briefly. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "Tomorrow, if I may." As he made his way back to the palace, carefully retracing his steps through the now quieting marketplace, Khalil knew he had found something precious, a window into a world where authenticity trumped appearance, where passion outweighed protocol. What he didn't know was that his simple yes would set in motion events that would challenge the very foundations of his carefully ordered world. Over the next few weeks, Khalil's double life fell into a delicate rhythm. Mornings were consumed by royal duties, council meetings, diplomatic functions, and endless preparations for his upcoming wedding to Princess Layla. But afternoons, whenever he could slip away, belonged to Layla's kitchen and Amira. Each visit deepened their connection. Khalil, still maintaining his identity as Karim, found himself sharing carefully edited versions of his life while soaking in Amira's unfiltered honesty. She taught him about the intricacies of spice combinations, the importance of timing in cooking, and the joy of creating something with your own hands. "Try this," Amira said one quiet afternoon, offering him a spoonful of sauce. "I've been experimenting with a new recipe." Their eyes met as he tasted it, and something electric passed between them. The sauce was extraordinary, complex layers of flavor that seemed to dance on his tongue. "It's incredible," he said truthfully. "What's in it?" "That's a family secret," she teased, her eyes twinkling. "Though I suppose I could be persuaded to share it with a regular customer who's become such a good friend." The word friend both warmed and wounded him. Their growing closeness was built on a foundation of lies, and the guilt of his deception weighed increasingly heavy. Meanwhile, at the palace, Princess Layla was orchestrating elaborate wedding preparations with military precision. That morning, she had cornered him in the palace gardens to discuss the reception menu. "The catering must be exceptional," she had insisted. "This wedding will be talked about for generations. I've heard of a local restaurant that's gaining quite a reputation for innovative traditional cuisine. Perhaps we should consider them for some elements of the menu." Khalil's heart had nearly stopped when she mentioned a local restaurant, but Layla continued, "Of course, we'll need to elevate everything to meet royal standards. I've already dispatched someone to investigate this establishment, Layla's Kitchen, I believe it's called." Now, watching Amira work in her kitchen, Khalil felt worlds colliding. She moved with natural grace, calling out orders to her small staff, tasting and adjusting seasonings with confident precision. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows caught the flour dust in the air, creating a golden halo around her as she worked. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. A well-dressed man in an expensive suit entered, followed by two assistants carrying tablets and notebooks. Khalil recognized him immediately, Hassan al-Malik, one of the palace's chief event coordinators. "I'm looking for the owner of this establishment," Hassan announced, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone used to authority. Amira wiped her hands on her apron and stepped forward. "I'm Amira Hassan, the head chef and owner. How can I help you?" "I represent the royal palace of Al-Sara," Hassan stated, causing Khalil to shrink further into his corner. "We're interested in discussing your possible involvement in an upcoming event of significant importance." Khalil watched as Amira's eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Please, let's sit down and discuss this properly. Would you like some tea?" The next hour was torture for Khalil, as he pretended to be absorbed in his meal, while Hassan outlined the opportunity, creating several signature dishes for the royal wedding banquet. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. He would be tasting Amira's cooking at his own wedding to another woman. "This is an extraordinary opportunity," Hassan explained. "Success could establish your restaurant as a premier destination for the kingdom's elite. However, you must understand the level of excellence required. Every detail must be perfect." Amira listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. "May I ask about the couple? I believe in creating menus that reflect the personalities of those being celebrated. The wedding is for His Royal Highness Prince Khalil," Hassan replied, causing Amira to glance unconsciously toward Khalil's corner. He held his breath, but her eyes passed over him without recognition. "And his betrothed, Princess Layla al-Rashid. I would be honored to present some menu options for consideration," Amira said finally. "When would you like to schedule a tasting?" As arrangements were made for a palace visit, Khalil felt his carefully constructed worlds beginning to crumble. Soon Amira would be in the palace, where maintaining his disguise would be impossible. The thought of her discovering his deception made his stomach churn, but the thought of losing her friendship entirely was even worse. As Hassan departed, Amira's face glowed with excitement and nervous energy. She hurried to Khalil's table, unaware of his internal turmoil. "Can you believe it, Karim, the royal wedding? This could change everything for us." Looking into her shining eyes, Khalil realized with crushing clarity that he had fallen in love with her. And in that same moment, he understood that he was about to lose her forever. The days leading up to Amira's scheduled palace visit were a whirlwind of emotions for Khalil. At the palace, he found himself torn between his duties and an overwhelming desire to confess everything to Amira. Meanwhile, his visits to Layla's kitchen became bittersweet, each moment tinged with the knowledge that their easy companionship was built on a lie. Amira, oblivious to his inner turmoil, threw herself into preparation for the royal tasting. Khalil watched her experiment with new recipes, combining traditional flavors in innovative ways that reflected her passion and creativity. Her excitement was palpable, and it pained him to see her so invested in an event that would ultimately shatter the connection they had built. "What do you think of this one, Karim?" Amira asked one afternoon, offering him a bite of a delicate pastry filled with spiced lamb and pine nuts. The flavors exploded on his tongue, a perfect balance of savory and sweet. "It's incredible," he said truthfully, struggling to keep his voice steady. "They'd be fools not to choose you." Amira beamed at him, her eyes sparkling with pride and a hint of something deeper. "You know, I couldn't have done this without you. Your encouragement, your feedback, it's meant everything to me these past weeks." Khalil felt a lump forming in his throat. He wanted to tell her everything, to beg for her forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he simply nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The day of the palace visit arrived all too soon. Khalil paced anxiously in his chambers, knowing that Amira would be arriving at any moment. He had arranged to be unavoidably detained for the initial tasting, hoping to postpone the inevitable revelation for as long as possible. From his window, he watched as a modest car pulled up to the palace gates. Amira emerged, looking both nervous and determined, in a simple but elegant dress, carrying a large insulated bag that undoubtedly contained her culinary creations. Unable to bear the thought of her discovering his true identity from someone else, Khalil made a split-second decision. He hurried through the palace's secret passages, ones he had used as a child playing hide-and-seek, and managed to intercept Amira just before she reached the kitchens. "Karim?" Amira gasped, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized him despite his royal attire. "What are you doing here? How did you get into the palace?" Khalil took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "Amira, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen before you say anything." He glanced around, ensuring they were alone in the corridor. "My name isn't Karim. I'm Prince Khalil." The color drained from Amira's face as the implications of his words sank in. The bag she was carrying slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. "What? But how? Why?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry," Khalil began, reaching out to steady her, but Amira flinched away from his touch. "I never meant to deceive you. When I first came to your restaurant, I was just trying to escape the pressures of palace life for a few hours. But then I met you and everything changed." Amira's shock was quickly giving way to anger. "Changed? You're engaged to be married. You let me pour my heart out to you, share my dreams, my fears. Was any of it real? Or was I just some amusement for you? A way to slum it with the commoners before you returned to your golden palace?" Her words stung, but Khalil knew he deserved them. "No, Amira, it wasn't like that at all. The time I spent with you, it was the most real, the most alive I've ever felt. But before he could finish, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Princess Layla rounded the corner, her face a mask of cold fury as she took in the scene before her. "So this is where you've been sneaking off to," Layla said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Consorting with the help. I expected better from you, Khalil." Amira's eyes darted between Khalil and Layla, the full weight of the situation crashing down on her. "I need to go," she said, her voice trembling. She scooped up her fallen bag and turned to leave. "Amira, wait," Khalil called after her, but she was already hurrying down the corridor, her retreating form blurring through his tears. Layla watched Amira go, then turned her icy gaze back to Khalil. "We will discuss this later," she hissed. "For now, you have a tasting to attend. I suggest you compose yourself and remember your duties to this kingdom." As Layla swept away, Khalil was left alone in the corridor, the weight of his choices crushing down on him. He had lost Amira's trust, possibly her friendship forever, and now faced the consequences of his deception on multiple fronts. With a heavy heart, he straightened his robes and made his way to the tasting, knowing that every bite of Amira's carefully prepared dishes would taste of regret and lost opportunities. The days following the disastrous palace encounter unfolded like a waking nightmare for all involved. Khalil found himself trapped in a maelstrom of emotions, torn between his royal duties and the ache of losing Amira's trust. The palace buzzed with whispers and sidelong glances as news of the prince's indiscretion spread like wildfire among the staff. Princess Layla, ever the strategist, wasted no time in asserting control over the situation. She summoned Khalil to her private chambers, her face a mask of cold composure. "Your little adventure could have cost us everything," she said, her voice low and controlled. "Do you have any idea of the scandal this could cause if it reaches the public?" Khalil met her gaze, feeling a mix of shame and defiance. "Layla, I never meant for any of this to happen, but I can't deny that my time with Amira showed me a life I never knew I wanted." Layla's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and something that might have been hurt. "Want? Your wants are irrelevant. We have a duty to this kingdom, to our families. I won't let your foolish infatuation jeopardize everything we've worked for." As Layla outlined her plan to contain the situation, Khalil realized with growing dread the extent of her influence and determination. She had already set in motion a campaign to discredit Amira, spreading rumors through carefully chosen channels that painted the young chef as an opportunist trying to seduce her way into royal favor. Meanwhile, across the city, Amira was facing her own crisis. The dream opportunity that had seemed so close now lay in shattered pieces around her. She had withdrawn from the palace catering contract, unable to bear the thought of creating a wedding feast for the man who had deceived her so thoroughly. In the quiet of Layla's kitchen, closed for the day to allow her time to process, Amira sat surrounded by the tools and ingredients that had always brought her comfort. But now, even the act of cooking felt tainted by memories of Khalil, or Karim as she had known him. Her mother, Farida, approached cautiously, setting a steaming cup of mint tea before her daughter. "Amira, Habibi, talk to me. What happened at the palace?" Amira looked up, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Oh, Mama," she said, her voice cracking, "I've been such a fool." As Amira recounted the events, Farida listened with growing concern. When Amira finished, Farida took her daughter's hands in her own. "You are not a fool, my love. You opened your heart, and that is never foolish. But now we must be strong. This restaurant was your father's dream, and it has become yours. We cannot let this setback destroy all we've built." Inspired by her mother's words, Amira found a glimmer of her old determination. She stood, wiping her eyes, and began to gather ingredients. "You're right, Mama. I won't let them take this from me too. I have an idea." Across town, in a luxurious office overlooking the city, Princess Layla was holding a clandestine meeting with Hassan al-Malik, the palace event coordinator. "I want you to make sure that this chef and her little restaurant fade into obscurity," Layla instructed. "Use whatever connections you have. I don't care how you do it, but ensure that no one of consequence ever eats there again." Hassan nodded, understanding the implicit threat in Layla's words. "It will be done, Your Highness. But may I ask, what of the prince? He seemed quite attached." Layla's eyes narrowed. "Leave Khalil to me. He'll come to understand that this is for the best. Our union is about more than just ourselves. It's about the future of this kingdom." As the sun set over Al-Sara, casting long shadows across the city, three individuals found themselves at crossroads. Khalil, pacing in his chambers, wrestling with his conscience and the weight of his responsibilities. Amira, in her kitchen, channeling her pain and betrayal into a new culinary creation that would become her signature dish. And Layla, standing at her window, gazing out at the kingdom she was determined to rule no matter the cost. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom, challenging long-held traditions and forcing each of them to question what they truly valued most in life. Little did they know that the coming days would bring challenges none of them could have anticipated, as the ripples of their actions spread far beyond the palace walls and the cozy confines of Layla's kitchen. As the days passed, the tension in Al-Sara grew palpable. The royal wedding preparations continued with an almost frantic intensity, overseen by Princess Layla's exacting standards. But beneath the surface, currents of discontent and whispered rumors threatened to upend the carefully constructed narrative of royal perfection. Khalil found himself increasingly isolated within the palace walls. His attempts to reach out to Amira had been met with silence, her number blocked, her restaurant closed to him. The weight of his deception and the loss of the one genuine connection he had formed outside the palace left him feeling hollow. One afternoon, as he absently reviewed wedding details with the royal planners, his father, King Fahad, requested his presence in the private study. The king's face was grave as Khalil entered. "My son," he began, his voice heavy with concern, "there are whispers reaching my ears. Whispers about your indiscretions with a commoner. Tell me this isn't true." Khalil straightened, feeling a mix of shame and defiance. "Father, do not speak," the king interrupted, raising a hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. You have a duty to this kingdom, to your future bride. Whatever foolish fancy has taken hold of you, I expect you to put it aside. The stability of our realm depends on this union." The words stung, but they also ignited something in Khalil, a realization that he could no longer simply play the role assigned to him. "And what of my happiness, father? What of living an authentic life?" King Fahad's expression softened slightly. "Happiness? Authenticity? Khalil, these are luxuries we cannot afford. Our lives are not our own. They belong to the people we serve." As Khalil left the study, his mind raced. He knew he had to make things right with Amira, to explain himself fully, but he also couldn't ignore the truth in his father's words. The fate of many rested on his shoulders. Meanwhile, across the city, Amira was channeling her pain and anger into a new direction. She had decided to enter the prestigious International Culinary Masters competition, a globally recognized event that could launch her career to new heights. In the kitchen of Layla's, she worked tirelessly, perfecting a menu that would tell her story through food. Each dish was a piece of her heart, flavored with the spices of her heritage and the innovative techniques she had developed. Her mother watched with a mixture of pride and concern. "Amira, you haven't slept in days. Please rest a little." Amira shook her head, her eyes bright with determination. "I can't, Mama. This competition, it's not just about winning. It's about proving to myself and to them that I am more than just some naive girl who can be discarded." As she spoke, a commotion outside caught their attention. A group of people had gathered, some holding signs. Amira's heart sank as she read them. "No opportunists in our neighborhood. Royal rejects not welcome." It seemed Layla's campaign to discredit her had taken root. Amira's fists clenched at her sides, tears of frustration threatening to spill. But then she noticed something else. Among the hostile faces were also supporters, regular customers, neighbors, people whose lives she had touched with her food and her kindness. One elderly woman broke from the crowd, approaching Amira with a warm smile. "Don't you listen to them, child. Your food brings joy to this community. We stand with you." Touched by this show of support, Amira found new resolve. She turned to her mother, a plan forming. "Mama, I think it's time we show everyone what Layla's kitchen is really about." In the following days, Amira threw herself into not just preparing for the competition, but also into reinventing her restaurant's image. She organized community cooking classes, started a program to provide meals for the less fortunate, and invited local artists to display their work in the restaurant. Word of her efforts began to spread, countering the negative rumors. Slowly but surely, the tide of public opinion started to turn. Back at the palace, Khalil was becoming increasingly aware of the machinations around him. He overheard snippets of conversation about Amira, about efforts to undermine her business. The realization that his actions had put her in this position filled him with guilt and resolve. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, he slipped out of the palace in disguise once more. He had to see her, to make things right somehow. But as he approached Layla's kitchen, he saw a crowd gathered outside. His heart raced, fearing the worst. Instead, he found a vibrant scene, a community event in full swing with Amira at the center, teaching a group of children how to make traditional sweets. Her face was alight with passion, her movements graceful and sure. For a moment, Khalil stood transfixed, struck by the strength and resilience of the woman he had come to love. He realized then that his choices had consequences far beyond his own happiness or duty. Whatever he decided, it would affect not just Amira, but an entire community that had rallied around her. As he turned to leave, conflicted and unsure of his next move, he didn't notice the figure watching him from the shadows. Princess Layla, her eyes cold and calculating as she observed both Khalil and the scene at Layla's kitchen. Her mind was already formulating a new plan, one that would test the limits of loyalty, love, and the very foundations of the kingdom itself. The day of the International Culinary Masters competition arrived, bringing with it a palpable sense of anticipation throughout Alara. For Amira, it represented more than just a chance at culinary glory. It was an opportunity to reclaim her narrative and showcase her true passion to the world. The competition venue, a grand convention center at the heart of the city, bustled with activity. Chefs from around the globe readied their stations, the air thick with the aromas of spices and simmering sauces. Amira stood at her assigned spot, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. Her mother and sister sat in the audience, their faces beaming with pride and support. As the competition began, Amira lost herself in the familiar rhythms of cooking. Her hands moved with practiced precision, crafting dishes that told the story of her journey, from her father's traditional recipes to her own innovative creations. Each plate was a piece of her heart, served with skill and passion. Unbeknownst to Amira, among the spectators sat Khalil, disguised once more. He watched in awe as she worked, her confidence and creativity shining through in every dish she presented. His heart swelled with a mixture of pride and regret, knowing that he had played a part in both inspiring and hurting her. As the judges made their rounds, tasting and evaluating each chef's offerings, the tension in the air grew thick. Amira's dishes drew particular attention, with judges lingering over her creations, their expressions a mixture of surprise and delight. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Princess Layla was orchestrating the final details of the wedding, set to take place in just a few days. She moved through the halls with purposeful strides, issuing orders and overseeing preparations. But beneath her composed exterior, a storm was brewing. An aide approached her, speaking in hushed tones. "Your Highness, we've received word that Prince Khalil has been spotted at the culinary competition." Layla's eyes flashed with anger, but her voice remained steady. "Thank you for informing me. Please ensure that our contingency plans are in place." As the competition drew to a close, the head judge stepped forward to announce the results. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the podium. Amira stood with her fellow finalists, her heart racing. In third place, the judge began, building suspense. From Italy, Chef Giovanni Rossi. Applause filled the room as the Italian chef stepped forward to receive his bronze medal. In second place, the judge paused again, heightening the tension. From Japan, Chef Yuki Tanaka. More applause as the Japanese chef accepted her silver medal with a gracious bow. And the winner of this year's International Culinary Masters competition. The judge's voice rang out clear and strong. From our very own Alara, Chef Amira Hassan. The convention center erupted in cheers. Amira stood stunned for a moment, tears of joy streaming down her face as the reality of her victory sank in. She stepped forward to accept her gold medal, her hands trembling slightly as it was placed around her neck. In the audience, Khalil found himself on his feet, applauding with the rest of the crowd, his heart bursting with conflicting emotions. Pride in Amira's accomplishment warred with the knowledge that his impending marriage to Layla loomed just days away. As the celebration continued around her, Amira scanned the crowd, her eyes locking briefly with Khalil's. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still as recognition dawned in her eyes. But before either of them could react, Amira was swept up in a sea of congratulations from fellow competitors and admirers. Khalil slipped away, his mind in turmoil. He knew he had to make a decision, one that would affect not just his own life but the lives of everyone around him. The weight of his royal duties pressed down on him, but so too did the undeniable pull of his heart towards Amira. Later that evening, as Amira celebrated her victory with her family and supporters at Layla's kitchen, she received an unexpected visitor. Hassan al-Malik, the palace event coordinator, entered the restaurant, his face a mask of professional courtesy. "Congratulations on your victory, Chef Hassan," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I come with a message from the palace. Despite recent complications, their Royal Highnesses would still be honored if you would consider creating a signature dish for the wedding banquet. It would be a gesture of reconciliation and a showcase of Alara's culinary excellence." Amira stood silent for a moment, weighing the offer. It was a chance to prove herself on the highest stage, to show that she was above petty conflicts. But it also meant facing Khalil again, and in the context of his wedding, to another woman. I I need time to consider this offer, Alara replied carefully. Please convey my thanks to their royal highnesses. I will have an answer for you tomorrow. As Hassan left, Alara turned to her mother, her eyes seeking guidance. Farida took her daughter's hands in her own. My dear, this is a decision only you can make. Listen to your heart, but also remember the strength you've shown these past weeks. Whatever you choose, we stand with you. Across the city, in the opulent surroundings of the palace, Khalil stood on his balcony, gazing out at the twinkling lights of Alara. In one hand, he held the ornate invitation to his own wedding. In the other, a simple ticket stub from the culinary competition, a reminder of the life he had glimpsed beyond these gilded walls. With the wedding just days away, both Khalil and Alara found themselves at a crossroads, each facing a decision that would shape not only their own futures, but potentially the future of the entire kingdom. As the night deepened, the stars above Alara seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what the dawn would bring. The day before the royal wedding dawned with an air of expectancy hanging over Alara. The city was adorned with flags and banners, streets bustling with excitement as final preparations were made for the grand event. Yet within the palace walls and in a small kitchen across town, two souls grappled with decisions that would alter the course of their lives. Khalil paced his chambers, the weight of his impending choice bearing down on him. The ornate wedding attire laid out by his attendants seemed to mock him, a physical manifestation of the life mapped out for him since birth. He thought of Alara, of her resilience and passion, of the world he had glimpsed through her eyes. With sudden clarity, he knew what he had to do. Across the city, Alara stood in Layla's kitchen, surrounded by the familiar scents and sounds that had always brought her comfort. Her gold medal from the competition hung proudly on the wall, a testament to her skill and determination. Before her lay the ingredients for the signature dish she had been asked to create for the royal wedding, a task she had ultimately accepted, seeing it as a chance to close this chapter of her life with grace. As she began to work, her hands moving with practiced ease, Amira's mind wandered to Khalil. Despite the pain of his deception, she couldn't deny the connection they had shared, but she had made a promise to herself to move forward, to focus on her passion and the community that had supported her through it all. Meanwhile, at the palace, Princess Layla was overseeing the final details of the wedding with meticulous precision. Her face was a mask of calm determination, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions. She had invested everything in this union, seeing it as her path to the power and recognition she had always craved. As she reviewed seating arrangements with an aide, a commotion in the hallway caught her attention. Khalil burst into the room, his face set with resolve. "Layla, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. Layla dismissed her staff with a wave, turning to face Khalil with a raised eyebrow. "What is it, my prince? Surely any concerns can wait until after tomorrow's celebrations." Khalil took a deep breath. "No, they can't. Layla, I can't go through with this wedding. It's not fair to you, to me, or to the kingdom we're meant to serve." Layla's composed facade cracked for a moment, revealing a flash of anger and hurt. "You would throw away everything we've worked for? For what? Some common chef who caught your eye?" "This isn't about Alara," Khalil replied, though his heart skipped at the mention of her name. "It's about being true to ourselves and to our people. We deserve more than a marriage of convenience, and our kingdom deserves leaders who are authentic and passionate about their roles." Layla's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. For a moment, Khalil saw a flicker of understanding in her gaze, but it was quickly replaced by cold determination. "For you're making a grave mistake, Khalil. Think of the scandal, the political ramifications. Your father will never allow this." "I know," Khalil said softly, "but I have to try. For once in my life, I need to stand up for what I believe in." As Khalil turned to leave, Layla called after him, her voice tinged with a mix of anger and something that might have been respect. "Whatever you're planning, be prepared for the consequences. I won't stand idly by while you destroy everything we've built." Khalil nodded, understanding the implicit threat in her words. He knew the path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in his life, he felt truly alive. Back at Layla's kitchen, Alara was putting the finishing touches on her creation, a dish that represented not just her culinary skills, but her journey of self-discovery and resilience. As she worked, the bell above the door chimed softly. Looking up, she froze. Khalil stood in the doorway, no longer in disguise, his royal attire at odds with the humble surroundings of her restaurant. "Amira," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to see you before everything changes." Amira's heart raced, a mix of anger, hurt, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name swirling within her. "Your Highness," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm not sure what you expect to accomplish by coming here." Khalil stepped forward, his eyes pleading. "I came to apologize truly and completely, and to tell you that I'm calling off the wedding. I can't go through with a life that isn't authentic, that doesn't allow me to follow my heart." Amira's eyes widened in shock. "Khalil, do you understand what you're saying? The consequences—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "But being with you, seeing your passion, your dedication to your craft and your community, it showed me what really matters. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it honestly, as the person I truly am." As they stood there, the air thick with unspoken words and possibilities, neither noticed the figure watching from across the street, Hassan al-Malik, his face grim as he pulled out his phone to make a call. The eve of the royal wedding had become the eve of something much greater, a moment of truth that would challenge the very foundations of tradition and power in Al-Sara. As the sun set on the city, casting long shadows across the streets, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. The morning of what was supposed to be the royal wedding broke over Al-Sara, the city awash in golden light. But instead of joyous celebration, an air of tension and uncertainty gripped the kingdom. News of Prince Khalil's decision to call off the wedding had spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through every level of society. At the palace, King Fahad paced his private chambers, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. How could he do this? He thundered to his advisors. Doesn't he understand the magnitude of his actions? Meanwhile, Princess Layla had sequestered herself in her quarters, her carefully laid plans in tatters. But even in this moment of defeat, her mind was already working, calculating her next move in the ever-shifting landscape of power. Across the city, at Layla's kitchen, Amira stood surrounded by her family and closest friends. The restaurant had become an impromptu sanctuary, shuttered against the chaos unfolding outside. Her mother, Farida, squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Whatever happens, my daughter, we face it together." Khalil, having spent a restless night in a modest hotel to avoid the palace, now found himself walking the streets of Al-Sara. For the first time in his life, he moved among his people without disguise or pretense. Some recognized him, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion. Others simply saw a young man, lost in thought, navigating the bustling morning crowds. As the sun climbed higher, word spread that the king would address the nation. Televisions and radios across the kingdom crackled to life as people gathered to hear what would come next. King Fahad appeared on screens throughout Al-Sara, his face stern but composed. "My fellow citizens," he began, "today we face an unprecedented situation. My son, Prince Khalil, has chosen to step away from his duties and the arranged marriage that would have secured our kingdom's future. While this decision brings great disappointment, it also presents us with an opportunity for reflection and growth." The king paused, his next words carefully measured. "In light of recent events, I have decided to convene a special council. This council will include voices from all levels of our society to discuss the future governance of our beloved Al-Sahra. Prince Khalil will be given the opportunity to present his vision for the kingdom, alongside other candidates who wish to serve our nation." As the king's words echoed across the city, reactions were mixed. Some were outraged at the break from tradition, while others saw a glimmer of hope for a more inclusive future. At Layla's kitchen, Amira listened intently, her heart racing. She turned to her family, determination shining in her eyes. "This is our chance," she said. "Not just for me or for Khalil, but for everyone who has ever dreamed of making a difference." Across town, Khalil felt a weight lift from his shoulders. His father's words, while not an outright blessing, offered a path forward. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time he felt ready to face it. As the day progressed, the city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would unfold. Khalil made his way to Layla's kitchen, drawing curious glances and whispers from passers-by. When he arrived, he found Amira waiting for him, her face a mix of emotions. "Khalil," she said softly. "Are you sure about this? The risks—" He took her hands in his eyes meeting hers with unwavering resolve. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Whatever comes next, I want to face it with you by my side." Amira hesitated for a moment, then nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Then, let's face it together." As word spread of the prince's presence at the humble restaurant, a crowd began to gather outside. But instead of the angry mob some might have expected, the atmosphere was one of curious excitement. People from all walks of life, merchants, students, laborers, and even a few nobles, came together, drawn by the possibility of change. Sensing the moment, Khalil and Amira stepped outside to address the gathering. Khalil spoke first, his voice clear and strong. "People of Alara, I stand before you not as a prince but as a citizen. I believe in the strength and wisdom of our people, and I dream of a kingdom where every voice is heard, where tradition and progress walk hand in hand." Amira then stepped forward, her presence commanding respect. "And I stand here as proof that with passion, hard work, and the support of our community we can achieve great things. Let us work together to build a future that honors our heritage while embracing new possibilities." As they spoke, something remarkable happened. The crowd, initially skeptical, began to nod in agreement. Conversations sparked, ideas were shared, and a sense of hope began to spread through the gathering. In that moment, on an ordinary street in Alara, the seeds of change were planted. Khalil and Amira, standing side by side, represented not just a love story, but a new vision for their kingdom, one of authenticity, inclusivity, and shared purpose. As the sun began to set on this historic day, casting a warm glow over the city, the future of Alara remained uncertain. But in the hearts of its people, a new spirit had awakened. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and opposition, but for the first time in generations, there was a sense that anything was possible. Khalil looked out at the faces before him, then turned to Amira, their hands intertwined. In her eyes he saw the same determination and hope that he felt in his heart. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not just for themselves, but for the dream of a better future for all of Alara. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Khalil and Amira's journey has moved you as much as it has inspired us. Their tale of authenticity, courage, and the power of following one's heart in the face of tradition and expectation is one that resonates across cultures and generations. If you've enjoyed this story of love, duty, and transformation, we invite you to explore our carefully curated playlist of equally captivating tales. You can find it by clicking the link to your left. Your engagement means the world to us. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexities of life, love, and the human spirit. Don't miss out on our upcoming content. We have many more remarkable journeys to share with you. We eagerly await your thoughts and reactions in the comments section below. Your voice is an integral part of our storytelling community, and we can't wait to hear what you think. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the sands of Alara. Until our next tale, may your own story be filled with courage, authenticity, and the pursuit of your deepest dreams.